the transgender activists are comparing this to the civil rights movement. Activists are trying to amend, if I understand correctly, the Civil Rights Act to include transgender rights.
They are two very, very different things. To compare the level of disenfranchisement or marginalization of those in the LGBTQ community and those in the African American community is really offensive, very, very offensive to people who are of color. To mistreat another person who has been created in the image of God, they are an image bearer of God, because they don't identify the way you want them to identify, is inhumane, it's sinful, and as Christians, we need to stop that. One of the things that they brought out as well was the issue of gay rights and civil rights. And I know that was something that you wanted to ask me about.
Yes.
I could talk all day about that.
Maybe that could be a video on itself. But yeah, I would actually like to get your opinion on this because I've interviewed quite a few people about this topic, about critical theory, about postmodernism, just reading everything I can get my hands on. And this is a question I ask almost everyone, because that is an argument we hear, Ellen, a lot, is that the transgender activists are comparing this to the civil rights movement. They say that this is and he even interviewed I think it was a congressman or a senator in the documentary about the Equality Act. And I forgot about that, if I'm honest, until I saw the documentary again. And it's where the activists are trying to amend, if I understand correctly, the Civil Rights Act to include transgender rights. And it's really interesting because they think that they're the same. And I would love for you to break that down. What are your thoughts on that?
Hey guys, I know you're in the middle of watching a video, but check this out. I'm so very excited, guys. Listen, my book is out now, officially out. It's called MISLED, 7 Lies That Distort the Gospel and How You Can Discern the Truth. In this book, I highlight what I believe are the 7 top, most destructive, most harmful false teachings that many Christians are being deceived by. And the sad thing is they don't even realize it. So click the link below so you can pick up a copy of this book so that you can sharpen your discernment so that you are no longer vulnerable and you'll be able to discern truth from error. Okay, go ahead and get a copy of the book. Click the link below. Back to the video. Yeah, well, I have a lot and I'll try to keep them somewhat brief, but as a Black man, as an African-American man, I want to be sensitive to those who may be identifying with the LGBTQ plus community. I want to be sensitive to that, but I also want to be firm in that they are two very, very different things. And so much so that I took a couple of points and wrote some things down that I want to make sure I cover. The first thing is how they're different is that historically Blacks were way more disenfranchised as compared to whites, right? Or gays, right? So you could be white and gay and you could still drink from the same water fountains. You could still ride buses. You could still vote. You could still go to certain colleges. You could still play on certain golf courses, right? So to compare the level of disenfranchisement or marginalization of those in the LGBTQ community and those in the African American community is really offensive, very, very offensive to people who are of color, specifically because of the level of violence that we experienced as compared to the level of violence. I'm not dismissing people who identify in the LGBTQ camp have been mistreated. And let me just be first and firm to say this, from a Christian perspective, that is anti-Christ.
Yep.
To mistreat another person who has been created in the image of God, they are an image bearer of God, because they don't identify the way you want them to identify, is inhumane, it's sinful, and as Christians, we need to stop that, right? So we need to make sure that we're not part of the problem there. We need to love them, right? But with that being said, there is no comparison between the level of violence and hatred as it relates to, being lynched and being enslaved and, creating law, not just trying to change the law like what they're trying to do. We're talking about creating laws for the purpose of marginalizing an entire race. So we're trying to create laws so that you can't buy a house, so that you can't vote, so that you can't live in certain places, so that your kids can't go to certain schools, so your kids can't do these things. You're creating laws. So to compare those two, once again, is not wise. And then, civil rights really involves people, not behavior. Civil rights was all about how can we make rights for people. It had nothing to do with behavior. It had everything to do with people, right? And with that being said, another big one, and I know that those who identify in the LGBTQ will fight me on this, but the big difference is that as Blacks, we don't have a choice to hide who we are. Perfect example. All right. If I went into a job interview and there was someone there who was a racist, I could be qualified for that job. There's no way for me to hide the fact that I'm a Black man when I go into that interview, as much as I may want to not, right? So if that person is racist, they're going to automatically marginalize me and probably not give me the job. If you are someone who identifies in the LGBTQ+, I understand that you identify that way, but it's not the first thing that people see. And so therefore, when people see you, they don't automatically say, oh, that person is gay, so therefore let me stereotype them, or let me have a prejudice towards this particular person. You can function in society so much so, and I know I'm going on about this, but so much so that I taught in the public school system next to a guy who was married. He had a wedding ring on. For years, I thought he was married to a woman because he didn't carry himself in any way other than just, he was manly, he was a cool guy, we got along. It wasn't until my 8th year of teaching that I learned that he actually was married to another man. So that's the point, is that you can go through society and function without these things. And then, if we want to go spiritual, the Bible doesn't say anything immoral about being Black. Right? The Bible. Now that's why progressives will try to, maybe change, the Bible did, but the Bible says nothing about if you are born Black or if you're a person of color, that is equating to immorality.
Solid.
Right? Yeah. But when it comes to all these other areas of, the Bible talks about a man should not dress as a woman shouldn't dress as a man, a man should not lay with another man the way he lays with a woman, all these things. The Bible is clear about those things. And then the last thing I'll say is this, the extent of it, right? The civil rights and the lack thereof affected millions and millions of people around the country. So just the sheer numbers of the civil rights is in no comparison to what the gay rights, people are trying to fight for gay rights. I'm not saying there's no similarities, but to compare the two, to me, is very offensive to people of color.
Alan, thank you for sharing that. I think that you made a lot of really, really good points. I don't think that the two are equal to each other. And, it reminds me of quite a few things, like even me as a woman, if somebody were to identify as a woman, does that mean they all of a sudden identify with the plight of women? There's a lot of sparring right now going on with feminists and the LGBTQ movement, because if you can't define what a woman is, what does that mean that, for the movement of the women? So it makes me understand a lot of what you're saying. And it brings me to another question I wanted to ask you about, kind of off script, but if everything's a social construct in Western society, it makes me wonder about race, right? Where if under this whole veil of redefining everything in the, name of science and being skeptic about that, race can't be a social construct any more than gender can. Nobody would say that race is a social construct. It is just right. What you are. But there are people that would, ironically argue different. So it's a very inconsistent thing. And it makes me wonder that, there's an agenda behind it. Whereas with the civil rights movement, that was tethered to reality. That was something that was a wrong that's always been wrong. And biblically speaking, that was an excellent point about, the trans homosexuality. It's very, very clear. People can redefine it, but it's very black and white when it comes to that. Pardon the pun. But yeah, thank you for speaking more about that.